December 25, 1996, Boulder, Colorado, 4:30 p.m. The Ramsey family, parents and two children, 6-year-old daughter JonBenét and 9-year-old son Burke, went to visit friends. That evening, the celebration was enhanced by an invited Santa Claus, and little JonBenét received numerous gifts. The parents personally selected gifts for their daughter, a two-wheeled bicycle, a large plush teddy bear, and a gold pendant with engraving. According to the Ramsey family's account, the celebration concluded at 9:30 p.m. The girl, exhausted from the eventful holiday day, fell asleep in the back seat of the car on the way home. Around 9:50 p.m., her father, John Ramsey, carried her in his arms to her bedroom on the second floor and gently placed her in bed. Early in the morning, the Ramsey family began preparing. The family planned to travel to their country residence, where they intended to welcome the new year. Patricia Ramsey, carefully preparing herself and her family, began descending the stairs from the third floor. Approaching the kitchen on the first floor, the woman did not check her daughter's room. On the last step, a note composed of 3 sheets caught her attention. The contents of the letter were shocking. An unknown kidnapper was reporting the abduction of JonBenét and demanding a ransom of $117,000. The note instructed the parents to place the money in a brown grocery paper bag and wait for a phone call between 8 o'clock and 10 a.m. It was especially emphasized that the parents should not inform anyone about the child's kidnapping, otherwise they would never see their daughter alive again. In a state of shock, Patricia rushed to her husband. John urgently checked the children. Burke was sleeping peacefully in his room, and JonBenét's bed was empty. Immediately calling the police, the call was received by the law enforcement dispatch at 9:25 a.m. Before describing subsequent events, it is worth examining the Ramsey family more closely in understanding the background of the tragedy. John Ramsey was a successful businessman, co-owner of an IT company. His wife Patricia had previously worked in the modeling business and participated in prestigious beauty contests, including competing for the Miss America title. At the time of her daughter's birth, she left her professional career, but her love for the beauty industry did not disappear. Instead, Patricia fully focused on promoting her daughter in this field. A unique phenomenon was JonBenét's rapid start in the world of children's beauty pageants. At 6 years old, she already had an impressive collection of titles: Miss Christmas, Star Kids, American Queen, Miss Colorado, and others. Modeling industry agents were confident in her future success. Media regularly published photos and stories about the young star. The Ramsey family belonged to an affluent social class, and their daughter was a widely known child star. It is worth noting that the outfits in which 6-year-old JonBenét was dressed often seemed inappropriate for a child, attracting ambiguous attention from those around her. After the phone call to the police, Patricia Ramsey and her husband began calling friends and acquaintances, informing them about the horrific event. JonBenét's parents violated the primary rule warned about in the kidnapper's note from the first minutes after receiving the terrifying message. They immediately called the police and invited numerous people to their house. At 9:33, the first patrol cars appeared near the luxurious Ramsey residence. Soon, the courtyard was filled with cars of friends, relatives, and acquaintances. Chaos and noise reigned everywhere. No one even considered that excessive activity might attract the kidnappers' attention or interfere with their plans. The police officers invited to investigate behaved strangely. Instead of immediately examining the enormous 15-room house, they simply sat in the living room. The family's friends bustled in the kitchen, trying to calm and support the bewildered Patricia Ramsey. In the confusion and emotional tension, everyone literally trampled possible evidence. The police passively waited for the promised phone call from the kidnappers, not even attempting to actively search for the child. Hours passed. By 10 in the morning, no call had come. Anxiety grew with each minute. Only at 1 in the afternoon did someone finally suggest thoroughly searching the entire house. John Ramsey, along with friends, began their own search. Strangely, no police officer joined them. As they descended to the basement, they had no idea what was about to happen. When they opened the basement door, they saw something horrifying. The lifeless body of little JonBenét lay on the floor, wrapped in a blanket. The father immediately picked up his daughter, trying to comprehend the unthinkable. The forensic medical examination, conducted at 8 in the evening that same day, revealed terrifying details. The girl was dressed in a white shirt and a sweater with a star pattern. Her hair was neatly gathered into 2 ponytails. An engraved bracelet adorned her right wrist, while her left wrist was tightly bound with a knot of rope. Particularly horrifying were the injuries to the child's neck, a double loop of the same cord, one end of which was tied to a wooden stick. Experts found signs of a head blow, bruises, and signs of strangulation. The police recorded additional telling details: an open basement window, an unknown handprint on the doors, and an interesting circumstance regarding the ransom. It turned out that $118,000 was almost exactly the amount of John Ramsey's annual bonus, which he had recently received. Experts reached a devastating conclusion: the girl was alive during the first blow, and death occurred from strangulation. No signs of systematic violence were found, though some inexplicable manipulation was documented. That day, the life of a little star who had already become famous across America was cut short. The forensic examination revealed horrifying details of the crime. Specialists suspected an electric shock device might have been used against little JonBenét. The murder weapon was a makeshift device, an ordinary school shoelace tied with a double knot and a toothbrush fragment. Pieces of pineapple were found in the girl's stomach. This meant she had eaten the fruit less than 4 hours before her death. Pathologists established the exact time frame of death, between midnight and 6 a.m. The Ramsey family was temporarily evacuated due to safety concerns. Until December 29, they remained under heightened protection before returning home, where the investigation was in full swing. Surprisingly, the first suspect was 72-year-old Bill McReynolds. Interestingly, this candidate was personally proposed by John Ramsey. The man had a striking appearance: gray hair, a long beard, a quintessential Santa Claus. JonBenét and her brother Burke adored Bill. The day before the tragedy, the girl had even taken a tour of her own house with him. A theory emerged that he might have promised to show her something, invited her to the kitchen, and then descended to the basement. A strange note from Bill was found in the girl's belongings with a cryptic text: "Everything special that will happen to you is dumb." Additional intrigue was added by information about Bill's past: his daughter had once been raped, and his wife had even written a play about a girl's murder in her own basement. However, McReynolds had an ironclad alibi, confirmed by numerous witnesses. The next candidate was 26-year-old Michael Haig. The police found him in his trailer. One of his friends shared an interesting detail: in November 1996, Michael boasted about planning a job with a partner, hoping to earn around $60,000. The sum was remarkably similar to the ransom in the note, $118,000. However, beyond these words, no evidence existed. Moreover, interrogating Michael was impossible: he was in prison. The 38-year-old Gary Oliva raised particular concern. JonBenét's poems and an electric shock device were found in the trunk of his car. Previously, the man had been convicted of minors and even attempting to strangle his own mother with a telephone cord. Oliva lived just 10 houses away from the Ramsey family. He openly admitted to being obsessed with the girl. He even had a personal altar at home dedicated to the little beauty queen. The man collected her pageant photographs and had once placed her face on makeup money. His confession was striking: "I loved and respected her so much that I would never harm her." During the investigation, Oliva underwent a massive number of tests, including polygraph examination. It seemed that each suspect had something that could point to their involvement in the crime. And simultaneously, something that completely removed suspicions. Conducted tests completely ruled out Girioliv's involvement in the murder case. No direct evidence was gathered against him that would unequivocally indicate his guilt. The next suspect, and effectively the only person arrested in this case, was 40-year-old John Mark Carr. He was detained in Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. Law enforcement was concerned that the man had lived in a small town called Conyers Station, which was once home to the Ramsey family before their move. John Mark had worked for a time in an elementary school, from which he was dismissed. After JonBenét's death, he began collecting newspaper clippings about this sensational case. The man even planned to write a book about this story, which was essentially the reason for his arrest. Comparing the direct evidence against previous suspects and John Carr, the latter clearly lagged behind in terms of compromising materials. During interrogation, Carr claimed that he was present during the final moments of the girl's life. However, it soon became obvious that there was no real connection between him and JonBenét's murder. The man was diagnosed with a narcissistic spectrum mental disorder. He was so eager to attract attention that he decided to gain fame with a loud statement about the girl's murder. Moreover, all of his testimonies were absolutely inconsistent with the crime scene. Carr's relatives even provided evidence that he was in Georgia with his family on Christmas. Soon, all charges against John Mark Carr were dropped. Of course, these were far from all suspects in the case. The police kept under surveillance everyone connected to the Ramsey family. They particularly carefully investigated John Ramsey's colleagues who knew about his $118,000 prize. However, without exception, all suspects were able to documentarily prove their non-involvement in the crime. A logical question arises: why did the main suspects initially seem like potential murderers? The JonBenét case was extremely high-profile, and society exerted powerful pressure on law enforcement. Because of this, investigative bodies began to consider everyone who had previous convictions or exhibited deviant behavior. People with mental disorders could not help but pay attention to the little star. Each suspect had either photographs or other compromising materials. However, it must be clearly understood, beyond their desires and inclinations, there was no direct evidence of their involvement. And here we approach the most interesting stage of the investigation. Throughout the lengthy process, both the police and the public increasingly noticed certain contradictions in the Ramsey family's story. More and more people began to lean towards the idea that the reason for the girl's death might be hidden within the family itself. It turned out to be indicative that the girl was found wearing the same clothes she had been wearing the previous evening. Even her hairstyle remained untouched. Her hair was not undone. The parents claimed they had undone her hair, but the facts spoke differently. It's worth mentioning the not fully understood circumstances of JonBenét's pineapple consumption. According to the mother's statement to a reporter, at 8 p.m. the girl was already soundly asleep and, of course, could not eat anything. However, toxicology examination results showed that the girl had consumed pineapple for hours before her death. Moreover, death, according to the official conclusion, occurred after midnight. This meant that the girl had eaten pineapple between 8 p.m. and midnight. The White family, with whom the Ramseys had been guests that evening, emphasized that the children had not approached the table at the end of the evening. They were playing, and JonBenét was soundly asleep in the car. However, in the Ramsey house kitchen, a plate with cut pineapple pieces was found. On this plate, there were fingerprints of the father, John Ramsey, and son Burke. This meant that someone remembered feeding the girl pineapple already at home. At the same time, the family did not even mention this in any of their testimonies. Another telling fact was the text of the kidnapper's note. The message clearly stated not to disturb the police, and the text contained a number of strange moments and contradictions. All these details created a rather unusual picture and forced the investigation and the public to ponder the true circumstances of the tragedy that occurred in the Ramsey family. As we already know, the Ramsey family quickly invited many people to their house. In such tragic situations, parents usually behave much more cautiously. A typical parental reaction is to immediately call the police, as they are panic-stricken about their child's life. However, in this case, everything happened somewhat differently. They immediately and without hesitation began to make phone calls and invite various people over. Particularly suspicious was the fact that Patricia Ramsey's girlfriends were helping her clean the kitchen precisely at the moment when the police were just beginning to examine the crime scene. In standard investigative protocols, it is categorically forbidden to touch or clean anything before the complete examination is finished, in order not to destroy potential evidence. The Ramsey family additionally invited 2 lawyers, who were called along with the police and friends. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about this. However, it turned out that these lawyers were also helping to clean the premises, and precisely at the moment when the police were awaiting information about the kidnapper. If initially one could assume that cleaning was a way to help the family cope with stress, this detail later made investigators think much more seriously. Usually, parents of a kidnapped child are in complete mobilization and do everything possible to find the perpetrators, providing the most comprehensive information. Instead, the Ramsey family, on the contrary, actively hindered the investigation. For example, when the police asked John and his son Burke to provide written statements, they categorically refused. They were required to write a minute-by-minute account of their actions, a so-called psycholinguistic analysis, which is a quite effective method of checking testimonies. It is important to note that such an analysis needs to be conducted almost immediately after the crime, as over time the results become increasingly less accurate. Moreover, when they were offered a polygraph test, the family again refused. This strange behavior caused not just surprise among investigators, but genuine indignation. Because of this, they were in no hurry to release the girl's body for burial. Only with the help of lawyers did the family manage to achieve their goal. On December 31, 1996, JonBenét was buried. On January 2, 1997, 2 detectives went to Atlanta to take handwriting samples from Ramsey family members. At first, they resisted, but lawyers forced them to cooperate. All 3 family members wrote several text fragments. In total, 73 people from their immediate circle were examined. Graphological expertise revealed extremely telling facts. Among all the checked handwriting samples, only one maximally matched the note's text, the handwriting of JonBenét's mother, Patricia Ramsey. The note was written slowly, as if intentionally concealed. However, experts argued that it is extremely difficult to hide one's own handwriting, especially in a stressful situation. Experts counted over 200 matches between Patricia's handwriting and the note's text. Moreover, it was established that the note was written with a pen from the Ramsey family, directly in their house. At the beginning of 1997, the police received another interesting piece of information. A woman living near the Ramsey house claimed to have been in a relationship with John Ramsey. She openly confirmed the existence of such a connection, which added another unexpected turn to the investigation. The public statements of the couple were categorical and unambiguous. John claimed he did not know this woman, and Patsy immediately supported his version. Law enforcement, unfortunately, could not obtain any significant connections or evidence. On the fateful 30th of April, 1997, John and Patsy were called to the district attorney's office as suspects. The police hoped to also interrogate Burke, but the family's lawyers categorically refused, citing his young age. Patsy's behavior during the interrogation deserved special attention. Every time detectives tried to corner her with their questions, she would immediately go on the defensive. Her voice would rise, and her hands would wave almost theatrically, demonstrating emotional tension. When police officers drew her attention to the striking similarity between her handwriting and the handwriting in the kidnapping note, Patsy resolutely denied any resemblance. In her opinion, the only explanation for this similarity could be that the note was written by a woman. Strangely, when the same question was posed to John, he responded almost identically. According to him, the note was written by a woman. It seemed as if the couple had prepared a coordinated version in advance. After a day of interrogation, the family was allowed to return home. And then they resorted to an unexpected strategy. They began actively inviting journalists, essentially trying to play the role of a family broken by grief. Over time, they even published a book where they shared their experience of surviving the tragedy. Law enforcement clearly understood, the most probable suspects in the daughter's death were members of her own family. However, direct evidence was never found. Perhaps the reason for the girl's death was so shameful that the family resorted to a complex psychological maneuver, concealing the truth. It was then that a theory emerged, to which both the police and those who knew the case details were inclined: JonBenét might have been killed by her older brother Burke. If you gather all the facts together, this version looks quite logical. Firstly, if the murderer was John Ramsey, the girl's father, Patsy would hardly have defended him, especially after the public scandal with his mistress. Similarly, John would hardly have defended his wife if she had killed their daughter. The second important detail is Burke's psychological profile. A lonely boy who was the object of his parents' love suddenly found himself in the shadow of his younger sister. Constant beauty pageants in which JonBenét participated completely shifted the mother's attention to the daughter. Burke began to experience emotional outbursts of aggression. It is known that he even hit his sister, and there was a scar on her cheek which, according to the investigation, was left by her brother. The parents were most likely prepared to protect their child at any cost. After all, if the truth about the murder had come to light, they could have lost both of their children. Burke's psychological profile was complemented by increasingly horrifying details. In particular, relatives reported that shortly before JonBenét's death, the boy exhibited extremely deviant behavior. He would smear his own feces on his sister's hands and on her bed. Such actions are a serious indicator of deep psychological disorders. In numerous television interviews that Burke gave as he grew older, he would talk about those terrible events with an unnatural smile on his face. His emotional reaction was so inadequate that it raised additional suspicions among investigators. An important argument in favor of this version was an experiment conducted by the police. They checked whether a 9-year-old boy could deliver a blow of such force that would result in a traumatic brain injury for the girl. The experiment's result was unexpected. Such a scenario could indeed have been possible. Particular attention is drawn to that dramatic moment when Patricia called the rescue service at 8:25 in the morning. According to official testimony, Burke was supposed to be asleep. However, the phone call recording contained interesting details. Burke's and John's voices could be heard in the background, which gives rise to serious contemplation. The parents, overwhelmed by the horror of possibly losing their son and unwilling to disclose a family secret, could have consciously resorted to hiding the truth. Descending to the basement that tragic morning, they saw a horrifying scene that possibly changed their lives forever. The fear of losing their son prompted the parents to cover up the traces and create an artificial version of events. They tried to hide as much as possible the potential involvement of Burke in their daughter's death. Despite all versions and assumptions, the case remains unsolved. No direct, irrefutable evidence has been found, which transforms this story into one of the most mysterious forensic cases in American judicial practice. Every detail, every fact creates a complex mosaic of tragedy, which seems destined to forever remain shrouded in mystery. The theory about Burke's involvement looks the most plausible, but without absolute proof, it remains just one of the theories. For years, John Ramsey has expressed frustration over the lack of progress in the investigation into his daughter's murder. His dissatisfaction was compounded by the fact that for 12 years, police considered him the prime suspect and rejected opportunities to uncover new evidence. On November 25, 2024, Ramsey participated in the Netflix documentary series, Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey, which delves into key evidence, interviews, and theories surrounding this high-profile case. The series received critical acclaim. The documentary reignited a wave of public interest in the case, prompting the Boulder Police Department to re-examine the investigation. In a recent statement, Department Chief Stephen Redfern acknowledged past mistakes. Law enforcement methods have changed over the past 30 years. While we cannot go back to that horrific day in 1996, our goal remains to find JonBenét's killer. The Ramsey family has always vehemently denied any involvement in the crime. However, it took 12 years for the district attorney's office to fully clear John Ramsey and his son Burke, who was 9 years old at the time of the tragedy. JonBenét's mother, Patricia Ramsey, did not live to see justice served. She passed away from ovarian cancer in 2006 and was laid to rest beside her daughter in Marietta, Georgia. Investigator Lou Smith insisted until his death that an unknown intruder was responsible for JonBenét's murder. Before passing away in 2010, he handed over his findings to his family, leaving behind a list of 887 potential suspects. His children and granddaughter, Jessie van der Woerd, have continued his work, gradually eliminating names from the list. However, the process remains slow due to the time and resources required to locate individuals, collect their DNA, and conduct testing. "We have allowed the killer to walk free for over 28 years, said John Ramsey. It is now critically important that we investigate every credible suspect. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Until next time, friends.